Hey everybody, how's it going? And welcome back to my channel, Reading in the Dark. You may have noticed that I have turned the lights pink for this video. That is in honor of the book that I am reviewing, entitled My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessa Moshfegh. I think I'm going to change the colors of the lights to match the cover of the books that I review when I make these videos in the future. I think it's a fun idea, and I endeavor to be clever at all times. Ottessa Moshfegh is a very interesting author. If you don't know anything about her, she's sort of like a rising star in the literary world. She had a novella entitled Maglue. It was published in 2014. It's about a sailor who's locked up below decks, beat to hell, and with a blackout in his memory from the previous few days, being told that he killed one of the other members of the crew who he was very close to, and he doesn't remember anything. And there are sort of homoerotic undertones and the possibility that perhaps he loved this man. She also is the author of Eileen, which you've probably heard of as a novel from 2014 about a very sort of isolated, melancholy woman who lives with her alcoholic father and works at a boys' prison. A lot of people respond to that novel. I don't know if I would say that it's polarizing exactly, but Eileen shares lots of details about her personal grooming and hygiene moments. And people called the character weird and sort of gross and perverted. Moshfegh said in an interview, she said, "We are very deeply programmed to want to see people in real life as they appear on TV. The more we use and abuse our screens, the less a human being in her biological reality can seem beautiful." She also had a collection of short stories released called Homesick for Another World in 2017, which I have not read. So I think she's got a very interesting mind, and I'm a fan of this author. So when I knew that this new book was coming out, I was very excited, and I actually pre-ordered it. And this book is called My Year of Rest and Relaxation. It was published on July 10th, so only a few days ago. First of all, the cover, I think, is awesome. I think it's hilarious. So basically what happens in this novel is this woman embarks on this journey to self-erasure, in a way, hibernating in her apartment and taking all of these sedatives so that she can tune out the world and sleep, basically. So right off the bat, this book is kind of interesting because it's written in the first-person past tense. And it's a cool way to tell a story because it allows the narrator the opportunity to have sort of the benefit of hindsight without necessarily spoiling the story. I think it is the same sort of convention that she used in Eileen, and that's interesting to me. I think this narrator is in some ways sort of the flip side of Eileen, in that in the novel Eileen, that character was isolated and alone. She lived in her fantasies, and she was sort of on a journey of awakening through the course of the book once Rebecca showed up. Whereas in this story, My Year of Rest and Relaxation, she is choosing to sort of unplug from society. This is a novel about a young woman who studied art at Columbia University. She lives in New York City, and she works at this very posh art gallery. Has lost both of her parents in a very short span of time. She has a horrible relationship with an on-again, off-again boyfriend named Trevor, who is super manipulative and emotionally abusive towards her, and she accepts it even though she's smart enough to know that he's not a good guy. She has a best friend named Riva who is really self-absorbed and very insecure. Riva is really kind of her foil. She's engaged in the world. She's caught up in it. She's busy and shows up without, being invited, and is just kind of overbearing and whatnot. But she keeps her around because she's the only friend she has. I was both relieved and irritated when Riva showed up, the way you'd feel if someone interrupted you in the middle of suicide. So she lives basically in the crossroads of the world and works at this art gallery at the front desk. And it's an art gallery filled with crap. It's an art gallery filled with really hoity-toity, self-important, self-indulgent, avant-garde art. And this character, this narrator who is not named, knows that it's crap. Moshfegh is very funny, and her sort of takedown of this style of art is really, really funny. So she's so disillusioned with the art scene there that I think that bleeds into the rest of her experience of life, and she's disillusioned with people because Riva is so phony. And she says the art world had turned out to be like the stock market. a reflection of political trends and the persuasions of capitalism, fueled by greed and gossip and cocaine. You get the impression that this narrator doesn't know how to recognize value in real things because so much of what she's surrounded by is false. Ottessa Moshfegh has taken on kind of a challenge here in telling a sort of transformational story about a character who, on the surface, is kind of not immediately going to be that likable. She's got a job, she has an education, she's described as being tall, thin, blonde, white, and very pretty. Effortlessly pretty. And now she has inheritance and she has taken possession of the family home that she can sell whenever she wants. So she's kind of got a lot of trauma in her past, but she also has a lot of privilege. And she's miserable. She decides that she wants to unplug. She wants to sort of wipe the slate clean. And so she decides what she wants to do is hibernate for a year. She wants to sleep for a year. Her hope is that if she spends enough time asleep, that all of her associations with people and pop culture and her boyfriend and her friends and her body and sex and art and everything, all of the good associations, the bad associations, will be dulled away and replaced with this vacuous sort of blank slate, and she can start fresh. I knew in my heart, this was perhaps the only thing my heart knew back then, that when I'd slept enough, I'd be okay. I'd be renewed, reborn. I would be a whole new person. Every one of my cells regenerated enough times that the old cells were just distant, foggy memories. My past life would be but a dream, and I could start over without regrets, bolstered by the bliss and serenity that I would have accumulated in my year of rest and relaxation. Her friend, of course, Riva, says that this is a little bit crazy because people don't hibernate. But she said, sure they do. And she decides that she needs medicinal help. So she finds a really unscrupulous psychiatrist named Dr. Tuttle, who is hilarious and horrible. So Dr. Tuttle is willing to put her on anything, and she does. She puts her on sedatives out the wazoo. She puts her on... Okay, so there's NyQuil. She takes a lot of that. I mean, she's popping 3 or 4 pills at a time of like Ativan, Ambien, Xanax, Sulfaton, Nembutal, Zyprexa, Seroquel, and then a fictional drug that she takes that really throws her for a loop called Infirmitorol. She goes down this rabbit hole of kind of losing her mind in all these drugs. A month or so into her experiment, she feels a little foggy, and she likes it. This was how I knew the sleep was having an effect. I was growing less and less attached to life. If I kept going, I thought, I'd disappear completely, then reappear in some new form. This was my hope. This was the dream. And for a while, she has a good time, and then she takes the Infirmitorol. I don't know how to pronounce it since it's not real. And she blacks out. She wakes up 3 days later and she doesn't remember anything that happened. And then from that point on, she becomes a true insomniac, which is what she told the doctor she was to begin with, and can't sleep. And that's sort of where everything switches. And so she sort of spirals down through this journey of abusing all of these sedatives and trying to find a way to finally get back to sleep. She watches every movie she owns on VHS until her VCR breaks. It's a trip. The reading this story is entertaining and extremely funny. While all the while, you become increasingly concerned about her health because she's mixing so many drugs, and you just don't know if she's going to live to the last pages of the book, but you know she does because she's narrating the story from the past tense. So she's telling you about her year of rest and relaxation, and yet as you're reading it, you're thinking, oh my God, stop, no, I think 2 Ambien is enough. She goes into a drugstore when she's getting her prescriptions filled, and she does the blood pressure test, and it says pulse 48, pressure 80/50. That seemed appropriate. It's funny, and it's distressing. You're very worried about her, but in her own sort of like berserk, stumbling about manner, drugs aside, the choice to check out from society and heal herself, she's sort of onto something in a way. I mean, her experiment in some ways is sort of an attractive one. You never get the impression that you're reading about the destruction of, the death of, the humiliation of, or the ruination of, this woman. And what I like about her character and what I like about what she does is that I sort of feel like she's a very strong female character, in that it's interesting that it is a woman who decides to do this for herself, and a woman who is the doctor who enables her to do it, not a man. Nobody gets in her way. She's wealthy enough and financially independent enough to make it happen, and she does it. Even when it gets away from her a little bit, she never seems totally out of control, and that's kind of fascinating. Something else that I think is very important is that she spends a good deal of time blacked out. At no point during her experiment, during any of this time, is she ever victimized. This is not a book about rape, and you can agree with or not agree with her decision to sort of step out of society for a year, and you can call her self-indulgent and selfish and lazy and all of those things, and to varying degrees you could be right about that. But her hope is to restore herself to sort of a blank slate, and that she'll know when it's been enough time and she'll be better then. So does it work? You have to read the book to find out. But I will just say that I'm a big fan of this book. I was wondering at one point, while we were sort of trudging through the never-ending parade of drugs and her having crazy dreams and just it being funny, whether or not it was going to amount to much. And then it very quickly did. And sort of philosophically, I find it really, really interesting. What's interesting is that this novel is set in the year 2000 and culminates in 2001, just before 9/11. If you were able to manage a cleanse or a reboot, or however you want to put it, like this narrator is attempting, would you emerge from that cleanse more prepared to deal with tragedy or less prepared? What's the difference between being centered and healed, sort of purified in a way, and being soft? And when do we need to check out? When do you need to cleanse and restore and rest? Come back to center, return to zero. Can we survive the world without our paranoia? Without our associations, the negative ones that we've formed over the years? Is it possible to unlearn them? That's an interesting question, and I think it's sort of what this narrator is trying to do. If you don't want to read about very uncensored sexual situations and swear words and whatnot, this is not the book for you. But there, as I said, there is no rape. There is just some very self-destructive behavior, and there are sexual situations. And in one particular case, she's with her boyfriend, and I think it's a little degrading. And there's lots of drug use, and there's drinking, and there's depressive thoughts, and there's borderline suicidal behavior. So if you're squeamish about really almost anything, and if you've suffered from or know anyone who has ever suffered with any kind of drug addiction, it's possible that this is not the book for you. But this book very unexpectedly had me in tears, and it has a beautiful ending. It was very life-affirming and meant a lot to me. It's a weird story. It's sort of like a book about this crazy-ass white girl with lots of money who doesn't have to work for a living, who's sad. And yet it manages to mean so much. And I think that's really beautiful, not only because it would be a challenge, but because she reminds us that everybody has a hurt that we know nothing about. And there's variation and complexity and subtlety and nuance and layers and beauty in all humanity. I really like this book. That said, although when I first finished this book, it was 5 stars because of how I was feeling. I was in tears, and I was impressed and surprised, and I loved it, and I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads right away. Like immediately, I was just like, oh my God, and I just hit 5 stars. In preparing this review, I started thinking about it and realized that it can't be. There's context. You know, there should be context to every work of art, and in and of itself, this book is beautiful and wonderful and lovely, and I really do like it. I'm very fond of this book. But in context, in our world, I think I fault it. Given the sort of lighthearted, comedic nature of Moshfegh's writing, I don't think this book showed enough of the negative consequences of abusing prescription drugs. And I'm not saying that it needed to be a morality tale or an after-school special, but people have unintentionally killed themselves by taking too many sedatives or mixing them, and nothing happens to her. She doesn't, spoiler alert, she doesn't die, and she's sort of, the story does what it does, and it's beautiful, and it's life-affirming, and it's great, but in some ways I can't give 5 stars to a book that, in my opinion, makes light of drug use. And with that in mind, it can't be 5 stars. And so I think I'm going to give this book 4 stars. My Year of Rest and Relaxation is fascinating. It's crude, it's devastating, and it's elegant. I ended the book up feeling very, very moved and really, really renewed and sort of so happy to have read it. But unfortunately, in this case, although I think it's a lovely work of art, I needed there to be a little bit, some sort of medical or health-related consequences to this narrator as a result of all of the drugs that she took and mixed together and took with alcohol, and there really isn't any. I can't give 5 stars to a story like this for that reason alone. And that's unfortunate, but people die from this every day. So for me, this was a 4-star read. So that's my video. That is my review of Ottessa Moshfegh's new novel, My Year of Rest and Relaxation. It is available now in print, ebook, what have you. I'm a big fan of this book. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button below, hit the thumbs up button below, and don't be afraid to subscribe to my channel should you feel so inclined. So until next time, remember to read more books, drink more coffee, but don't forget to sleep, because that can be a big problem.